Merlin. Arthur's sorcerer Merlin would have been a druid, the bardic class that produced the mythical literature and the art of the Celts. Magic was not, wrote Pliny in the 1st century AD, indigenous either in Greece or in Italy, but was so much at home in Britain and continued with such elaborate ritual that he said it would almost seem as if it was they who taught it to the Persians, not the Persians to them. 23. Astronomy was of prime importance to the Druids, who were said to have had much knowledge of the stars and their motions, of the size of the world, and of natural philosophy. According to Caesar, they discuss and impart to the youth many things respecting the stars and of our earth, respecting the nature of things, respecting the power and the majesty of the immortal gods. 24. Another Magian doctrine familiar among the Druids was that of reincarnation. According to Caesar, a lesson which they take particular pains to inculcate is that the soul does not perish, but after death passes from one body into another. 25. And Diodorus, among them the doctrine of Pythagoras prevails, teaching that the souls of men are immortal, and live again for a fixed number of years inhabited in another body. 26. According to Ammianus Marcellinus, the Druids were members of the intimate fellowship of the Pythagorean faith. 27. And the Christian father Hippolytus recorded. And the Celtic Druids investigated to the very highest point the Pythagorean philosophy, after Zalmoxis, by birth a Thracian, a servant of Pythagoras, became to them the originator of this discipline. Now after the death of Pythagoras, Zamalzes, repairing thither, became to them the originator of this philosophy. The Celts esteem these as prophets and seers, on account of their foretelling to them certain events, from calculations and numbers by the Pythagorean art, on the methods of which very art also we shall not keep silence, since also from these some have presumed to introduce heresies, but the Druids resort to magical rites likewise. 28. According to Caesar, a notable deity of the Gauls was Dispater, or Pluto, the god of the underworld. From him all the Gauls claimed to be descended, and on this account, says Caesar, they began their reckoning of the 24 hours of the day with the oncoming of night. Caesar also reported the existence among the Celts of personal gods with distinct titles and attributes, whom he equates with various figures in the Roman pantheon, Mercury, Apollo, Mars, and so forth, which was exactly what the Gauls themselves did after the conquest. He remarked that they held Hermes to be the chief of the gods, and looked upon him as the inventor of all the arts, as the presiding deity of commerce, and as the guardian of roads and guide of travelers. Like their Carthaginian and Canaanite forebears, the Celts were reputed to practice human sacrifice. It was said that the Celts would murder a victim by stabbing him in the back, and divine from his struggling. 29. In an early Christian document, the Dinsenchus, preserved in the Book of Leinster, it is said that the Celts would sacrifice their children to an idol to pray for fertility. It was milk and corn they asked from it in exchange for their children. How great was their horror and their moaning. 30. At times, for those gravely sick or in danger of death in battle, huge wickerwork images were filled with living prisoners and criminals, or even innocent victims, including children, and burned alive to seek the favor of the gods. Following the withdrawal of the Romans in the 3rd century, and even after when St. Patrick had converted the Irish to Christianity, the teachings of the Druids were never completely abandoned, but instead a unique culture developed, known as Celtic Christianity. Soon after its conversion to Christianity, Ireland was covered with monasteries, whose organizations were merely a continuation of the Druidic colleges. 31. Essentially, the arts of the Druids survived early Irish Christianity, as its abundant hagiography, steeped in magical ideas, plainly shows. Saint Columba, abbot and missionary traditionally credited with the main role in the conversion of Scotland to Christianity, after becoming a monk, lived and studied with a bard in Leinster, and later defended the cause of the Druids when their schools and teachings were attacked. 32. Christian Ireland, as Cahill demonstrates, in how the Irish saved civilization, became a bastion of study, and the community of Celtic Christianity was highly prolific in contrast to the rest of Europe, which was eclipsed during the Dark Ages. With their extensive libraries, Irish monasteries attracted students fleeing conflict from many parts of the world to meet there. Large quantities of manuscripts were brought there for safekeeping and copying. Many pagan writers were studied, and Irish monks knew Greek at a time when knowledge of that language had disappeared from the rest of Europe. The Celtic Christians also seem to have held ongoing contacts with the esoteric schools of Alexandria. Irish records show that 7 Egyptian monks were buried at Dysart Olaid in Ulster. Masses and prayers from apocryphal works used in Egypt were found in Ireland. 33 Irish monasteries were organized in close adherence to those in Egypt, Syria, and elsewhere in the Mediterranean world, and in many cases, the physical layout and arrangement of the monastic community were identical. 34. The Jewish tendencies within the Celtic Church were so prominent that it was explicitly accused of Judaism, and its adherents of being Jews. 35. The Sabbath was observed among them, and the Jewish Passover was officially celebrated. The killing of animals for food was performed in accordance with Judaic requirements. Surviving documents of the Celtic Church are full of references to the Jewish apocryphal books and other texts which had long been forbidden in Rome. Monks in general shaved a circular patch on top of the head, while Celtic monks shaved a strip from ear to ear, and while one of Rome's representatives accused them of wearing the tonsure of Simon Magus, Adaman, a distinguished Irishman, freely admitted it. 36. Finally, the last important figure in the tradition of Celtic Christianity was John Scotus Eriugena, 800, c. 877, the greatest Christian philosopher of the Dark Ages, whose Neoplatonism annoyed Rome, all the while shaping the systems it later adopted. Eriugena's translations of the works of Christian Neoplatonists, Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, Saint Maximus the Confessor, Saint Gregory of Nyssa, made them accessible to Western thinkers. In his principal work, On the Division of Nature, John Scotus attempted to reconcile the Neoplatonist doctrine of emanation with the Christian tenet of creation. Though highly influential upon his successors, notably the Western mystics and the 13th century scholastics, De Divus Ioni Naturae eventually suffered condemnation by the Church because of its pantheistic implications. Striking similarities have been recognized between his speculations and those of Kabbalistic writings, such as the Sefer HaEyun, or Book of Speculation. 37.